Tonight, drunk.
Hello, YouTube. SkepticalRoot. Today I wanted to talk about what I hope is going to be a shorter video. I'm really working on narrowing these, or shortening these. Okay, I'm really working on making these a little bit shorter so that I can cover content a little better. I'm actually might use this one as a test for my editing software, because it's early enough in the evening for me to actually possibly play with it a little bit, edit some stuff out, clean it up, maybe enhance the audio, who knows. Although I think my audio's been okay. I try to do a decent job with the audio, so we'll see what happens. What I want to talk about, though, is gun control. This is a topic that I started talking about once or twice in other videos that didn't get published because things came up or whatever. And I want to talk about particularly what my view on the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is and what it's good for. The Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution is as follows: a well-regulated militia, comma, being necessary to the security of the free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, comma, shall not be infringed. Now, that clearly states that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It has nothing directly to do with militias. Anybody who makes the militia argument for the Second Amendment lacks reading comprehension, perhaps, is trying to find sorry if this is making noise, trying to find an out, a methodological out, or some kind of out for the fact that the meat of the amendment says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Waxing poetic on the last comma, like, what does that mean to have the comma there? In modern English, that's certainly a strange place for a comma. I've not seen the original text in a while, and so I haven't thought of what exactly. I mean, could that comma have been an ink smudge or something? A fleck in the paper that was, copied over? Because it doesn't seem to fit there. Although there are a lot of commas in the Second Amendment. But the most likely reading of this amendment is something along the lines of omelets being necessary to a healthy breakfast, the right of the people to keep and bear frying pans shall not be infringed. Now, omelets certainly are something that can be made in frying pans, and using the argument that people could make omelets with frying pans, and therefore people should have frying pans, certainly seems to indicate that a good purpose for having frying pans is to make omelets. However, what the amendment would state, though, is that people are allowed to own frying pans. It doesn't necessarily say, it provides that as a possible reason, but it doesn't make the argument. What the amendment states in the case of the actual Second Amendment is that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Just like freedom of speech, just like the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment, and the rights. We do actually set limits, but we try to make them as free and liberal as possible. With firearms, we do the same thing. We've established a firearm to be a device that fires a projectile, typically from a compressed gas, at high speed out of a barrel towards a target. It is not a propelled device. So something like a rocket launcher or an RPG might not be considered a firearm. That's more of an ordnance, I suppose. I'm not going to sit here and Google the definitions, but if you want to, feel free to go ahead and determine it. But the way that the courts seem to have leaned is that you have to fire a projectile from a weapon in order for it to be considered a firearm. And we pretty much have open season on that. Having said that, I defend the Second Amendment wholeheartedly as one of the rights that Americans have. I think, like freedom of the press, most Americans should not exercise it. There is a fetishization. I'm just not going to get that word out. There is a culture of gun love in the United States, mostly perpetrated by gun manufacturers. Just like, kids loving SpaghettiOs, which are absolutely awful, in my opinion, or sugar frosted cereal, really promoting the heck out of something that is cool. Some people just buy the advertising. They do a good job at it. I mean, the gun manufacturers, the gun retailers, the NRA in particular, they've cultivated this culture of fear of the product that they sell. And of course, the cure for the fear that they're creating is the products that they sell. Worried that someone will break into your home, have a firearm for self-defense. Protect yourself and your family. From what? If some guy breaks in with a baseball bat, chances are you standing at the top of the stairs with a baseball bat would be enough to scare him off. Or a knife. Or a sword. Or a bow and arrow. A chainsaw. Hey, guess what? Stand at the top of the stairs with a chainsaw. Bet a guy with the baseball bat's going to be a little more afraid. But no, the implication is that this is a guy with a gun. Nothing stops a bad guy with a gun like a good guy with a gun. It's all part of the marketing strategy. And so many Americans have bought into it. There is a place and a purpose for firearms in the United States. In spite of the fact that it's current year, in this case 2016, and I can't remember where I read the statistics, but somewhere between 10 and 20% of the population at one time in the last 5 to 10 years has been a sustenance hunter, someone who hunts for meat because they can't afford proper, they can't afford to buy steaks or chicken all the time. My parents' families both come from small coal mining towns in Pennsylvania. And going back there, deer season shuts everything down. The gas station stays open. Sometimes, the gas station and the post office stay open. But police and fire sometimes are minimal. For the 2-day deer season, I guess everybody's out hunting deer. Because they're in Pennsylvania Pennsylvania has a state with the highest rural population of any state in the United States. A lot of people living in areas that are distant from city centers. Not to say that places like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh don't have lots of people in them. Most of the population of Pennsylvania is, it's mostly Appalachia. 2/3 of the state is in the Appalachian Mountains. 2/3, maybe slightly more than that. There aren't places to put towns. You end up with towns like Johnstown or Meadville or Punxsutawney. They're little hamlets at best, and that's the big city for some of these communities. What they do for work, I sometimes don't even know. The town my mom is from, for example, had a population of when she was growing up, and up until probably about maybe 10 years ago, had a population of about 850, and it was surrounded by farmland and woods, and that's there were 2 churches in town, one Methodist and one Catholic, one bar that I know of, a diner, a convenience store, a sort of grocery store, but that was it. They did have a pool and a decent park, though, but that's because they put it in that town instead of the town, any of the several towns in that township, or that borough. No, borough. It was a borough. We'll call it a county for lack of better designation here. That was the community pool for the area. But that was big time living. They were, we used to go back there rather frequently, and growing up, everybody go off deer hunting. When they weren't deer hunting, they were turkey hunting or trapping or something like that. My mom is the second oldest of 14. Their neighbors had 18 kids, and 21 pregnancies and 18 live births or something like that. But my grandfather was a coal miner. Both my grandfathers were coal miners. And when the coals weren't working, when the mines weren't working, it wasn't until almost the 60s that they had any kind of public assistance for them. So they would have to go out and they'd have to hunt for their food, and that became their lifestyle. If they wanted meat that week, someone would have to go get a turkey or a fox or deer, whatever it was, in order to feed the family. That still goes on back there. When people who live in this town, it has grown slightly, oddly enough, because I think a lot of people, once they got out of high school, they settled down and had kids right there because property was cheap. But they don't have anywhere to go, nowhere to work, So they get by on what they can, and they hunt for sustenance. And these people need firearms. I mean, they do bow hunt, and that's also something that they do, but perfectly legitimate application for firearms. Some guy living in a city who isn't hunting, I don't know that there's a need for it. And the people who are there should accept the fact that they don't need a firearm. But then you have this whole problem of escalation where the bad guys want them, and so the people who want to protect themselves from the bad guys have them, and then the police need bigger guns and better guns, and the crooks need bigger and better guns, and then the people who live in these houses need bigger and better guns because they don't want the bad guys to come and take their stuff. It's a mess. What do you do about it, though? You change people's attitudes about firearms. You don't have to ban firearms. I think that to some extent what America needs to do is really to fund some large-scale buybacks of firearms. Change laws in communities where if a firearm is used in a felony and the person is convicted of the felony, the firearm is melted down. It's disposed of. It's not resold. I know that police departments can make money by reselling this type of stuff. Firearms should be destroyed. They're going to make more anyway. But right now we have... right now there are almost as many firearms in America as there are Americans. And firearms are held in less than a third of the population's, in general. 2/3 of the population doesn't own a firearm. Actually, more than 2/3 of that. And I'm trying to remember if it's something like 27 to 35, somewhere in there, somewhere in that 27 to 35% range of households have a firearm in them, which is down in the last 20 years from almost 50% of households with firearms. But the number of guns has gone up. back in the stats that I saw, and if I can remember to look these up, I want to say that somewhere in the 1970s, the average number of guns per owner was something like 1.1 firearms. So if you had a gun, you likely might have had one gun. You might have had a rifle, you might have had a pistol. That might have been skewed in some outlying areas where someone had 2 or 3 guns. But on average, most people had less than 2 guns. Now that number is somewhere like 3.8 guns per owner. A lot of people don't need guns, don't have guns, but they don't want to sell them because they're not going to get anything for them, or they're afraid of, they don't know how to go about selling guns or something like that. A government buyback program would take care of that. Like Australia did in 1996 when they passed their gun regulations, they have huge buybacks. Well, you know what? Let's do some huge buybacks. Let's buy back some guns from people. Let's melt them down. Let's reduce the number of guns that are out there. If my fellow liberals think that guns are a problem and cause all kinds of problems with homicides and suicides, which, by the way, and I had a question about this not too long ago, so I had to look it up. But when you compare the United States with the European Union as a whole, there are fewer total deaths in the United States than there are in the European Union. Gun ownership is way, way higher in the United States than it is in EU countries. The idea that you can sit down and say that as an objective measure, there are more gun deaths in America. That may be true, but there are other forms of death that are causing deaths in other countries. It's not a fair comparison to compare like the United States gun deaths with Britain's gun deaths, because there are far fewer guns in Britain. But they also have a very different culture about guns. Canada the same way. There are lots of guns in Canada, not as many per capita, but there are fewer dead people in Canada because their culture is very different about guns. Same with Australia at this point, although Australia, their guns are very few and far between, and the total overall population death rate in Australia actually is lower than it is in the United States. But if you think guns are the problem, let's buy them back. Let's buy them back. Let's melt them down. Get them off the streets. Get them out of circulation. Stop buying them and then selling them again. That's stupid. Guns are used in a felony. They're gone after the conviction, and that's it. Reduce the number of guns without having to change the laws. I'm not necessarily against either limiting magazine sizes to some extent. I think that there are better ways to do it without necessarily changing the laws. Let's change the culture around guns. Just like when someone gets excited about, Easter candy, we can look at them and be like, dude, really? It's Easter candy. That's how we can be about guns. People walking down the street with guns or whatever. I kind of liken guns to... guns. I see guns as a tool with a specific purpose. And I liken it kind of to powered saws. Chainsaws, table saws, circular saws. When we have somebody who, owns a saw, table saw, for example, we think to ourselves, oh, okay, well, he's got a saw. He must, use it for something. He must have something to build, or has built something and decided it would be easier to buy it than rent it. And okay, cool. When we see a guy with 3, 4 table saws and a couple circular saws, and they're not, well, let's say they are in a display case of some kind. Okay, well, maybe they collect them. They're different types and models or something like that. When they start pushing their table saws down the street, just in case they might need to suddenly cut up some lumber for something, it gets ridiculous. And that's how we kind of need to approach firearms in public in general. I live in an open carry state. I don't see open carry very often. But when I see people open carrying, unless they're in camouflage and they're walking from a wooded area to their vehicle, they get second looks. They get weird looks like, what are you trying to prove here? What is it? What sense does this make? Are you afraid that the Russians are coming and they're going to storm the streets and you're going to have to shoot the damn commies? Doesn't make any sense. But that's it. That's my 2 cents on the Second Amendment. To summarize, the Second Amendment shouldn't be changed. The laws don't necessarily need to be changed. The culture needs to be changed. And we need to treat people who fetishize guns. Fetishize, there you go. I got it out that time. People who fetishize guns should be treated like they have some other strange fetish as well. The social pressure of thinking that they need to have guns for their protection. We should be viewing these people as the same kind of crazies who think that they're going to make lots of money at this point by Beanie Babies, on Beanie Babies. That's what I'm thinking of, man. In case you are watching this in the future or just have no idea what the Beanie Babies fad from a few years back. They were little stuffed animal things. All limited edition. And people collected them and sold them by the thousands, hoping to make money on them. Some people did pretty well on it. A lot of people just ended up with boxes of Beanie Babies. What do you do? So that's it. That's my too long rant, and that's good because, like I said, I want to try to edit some of this down. So if you see some jump cuts in here or something like that, it's not that. I've cut out an or a pause or something like this. Like me getting really close to the microphone or something like that. So I'll cut that stuff out. So maybe this will end up being a short video because if I cut enough of it out, we'll see if it works out. So, all right. So I guess that's it. Thanks a lot for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe. All those fun things. All those things you should be doing with a YouTube video. Do them with this one. Tell your friends that, hey, here's this guy with some rational ideas. And sometimes he's a little boring. But he's got some good ideas. Suffer through it. Thanks a lot. Goodbye. And hello. As always.
If it doesn't,